I just smashed the driver's side window of my brand new $150,000 Mercedes G-Wagon with a heavy steel tire iron. I didn't stop until the tempered glass was a pile of jagged diamonds on the asphalt, and the custom leather dash was scarred and broken. You might think I've finally lost my mind. You might think the pressure of running Denver's largest excavation firm finally cracked my gears. But this isn't madness. This is the purest, coldest rage I've ever felt in 49 years. This was me taking back the one thing my brother had already forged my name to steal. This was my declaration of war. My name is Sam. I've spent 30 years in the red dirt of Colorado, building Miller Excavation from a single rusted backhoe into a fleet of 60 heavy machines. I've dug the foundations for half the skyscrapers in this city, and I've got the permanent grit under my fingernails and the titanium rod in my leg to prove it. I built a $12 million empire with nothing but sweat and a refusal to quit. I thought I was building it for family. I thought I was giving my younger brother, Jeff, a career and my 24-year-old nephew, Toby, a future. I was dead wrong. I was just fattening them up so they could try and slaughter me. The wake-up call came 4 days ago at my equipment yard in Aurora. I'd been feeling off for weeks, dizzy spells, memory gaps, and a strange metallic taste in my mouth every morning. I figured it was just the high-altitude sun or the stress of the new airport contract. But then I noticed 2 of my Cat 336 excavators, $500,000 worth of iron, had vanished from the GPS grid. I didn't call the police. I'm an old-school guy. I check my own fences. I pulled the footage from the dead zone cameras I'd hidden in the yard years ago to catch fuel thieves, cameras my brother didn't know existed. What I saw turned my blood into liquid nitrogen. At 3:00 a.m. on Sunday, Jeff and Toby were in the yard. They were handing the keys of my excavators to a man I recognized as a notorious heavy machinery fence from across the border. But it was the audio from the hidden mic that truly killed me. "The old man is a dinosaur," Jeff said on the recording, leaning against my truck and lighting a cigar he'd stolen from my office. "He's so drugged out on the vitamins Vanessa, his wife, is giving him that he doesn't even know what day it is. Once the shady Dr. Toby signs the commitment papers tomorrow, Sam will be locked in a private ward in the Springs and will liquidate this entire yard before he even remembers his own name." Toby laughed, a sound that made me want to put his head through a brick wall. "I already forged his signature on the G-Wagon's title, Dad. I'm taking that ride to Vegas the second the ambulance doors shut on him." I sat in my dark office for 6 hours staring at that screen. My own brother, my own nephew, and my second wife, Vanessa, they were a team. They weren't just stealing my iron, they were erasing my life while they fed me poison in my own kitchen. The rage didn't come all at once. It leaked in, slow and steady, until I was vibrating with it. I realized then that if I fought back normally, they'd win. They had the forged papers, they had the medical evidence of my decline, and they had the element of surprise. But as I stood in my driveway today, looking at that G-Wagon, the car Toby thought he'd already stolen, I couldn't hold it back anymore. I grabbed the tire iron from my truck, and I let the world know that Sam Miller wasn't going quietly into any private ward. Jeff and Toby came sprinting out of the garage when the G-Wagon's alarm started screaming. They were shouting, asking me what the hell was wrong with me, their faces twisted in a mixture of fake concern and genuine fear that their payday was being dented. I turned to them, the tire iron still white-hot in my grip, and I didn't hide the fire in my eyes. I didn't mutter or stumble. I looked Jeff dead in the eye and told him that I'd found a glitch in the system. I told him that I was done with things that didn't work right, cars, machines, and brothers. I saw the look of pure, predatory calculation on Jeff's face. He shared a quick, triumphant glance with Toby. They didn't see the trap I was setting. They saw a man finally snapping, providing them with the perfect final piece of evidence to prove I was a danger to myself. "It's okay, Sam," Jeff said, stepping over the glass shards, his hand reaching out like he was calming a rabid dog. "You're just stressed. The car doesn't matter. Why don't we go inside? Toby and I have that specialist coming over tonight to help you get some real rest." I looked at the ruin of the car, then back at them. I forced a jagged, angry smile. "Yeah, Jeff," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Let's go inside. I think I'm finally ready to settle the books." I let them lead me into the house, leaving the $150,000 wreck in the driveway. The first move was mine. They think my anger is proof of my madness. They have no idea it's actually the fuel for their funeral. The walk into my own house felt like entering a gas-filled room with a lit match in my pocket. I made sure my boots dragged against the hardwood. I let my shoulders slump, but inside, I was wired tight. The tire iron was back in my truck, but the fire it had started was roaring in my chest. Jeff and Toby led me to my leather recliner like I was a piece of fragile glass they were about to sell. They were whispering behind my back, thinking I couldn't hear them over the fog in my brain. Jeff told Toby to keep an eye on me while he and Vanessa prepared the room. "I'm thirsty, Jeff," I muttered, staring at a blank spot on the wall. The car, it was too loud. "I know, Sam," Jeff said, his voice dripping with that fake saccharine pity. "Vanessa is making you some special tea. It'll help the voices stop." I sat there for an hour, the blind mule in the corner, while my house was transformed into a stage. But I'd already done my own prep work. 2 nights ago, while they were out celebrating their upcoming inheritance at a steakhouse in Cherry Creek, I'd called in a favor. I contacted a man named Elias, a retired corporate spy who'd helped me secure my yard from Union saboteurs 10 years ago. Elias didn't ask questions. He just showed up with a toolbox and a silent tread. By the time he left, my living room, the kitchen, and my office were rigged with high-definition pinhole cameras tucked into the crown molding and microphones hidden inside the electrical outlets. Every word they said was being streamed to an encrypted cloud server Elias was monitoring from a van 3 blocks away. That evening, the specialist arrived. His name was Dr. Aris, and he looked like a man who spent more time in courtrooms than clinics. He was wearing a suit that cost more than a foreman's yearly salary and carrying a briefcase that smelled of leather and lies. Jeff and Vanessa brought him into the living room. I played my part perfectly. I'd practiced the zombie look in the mirror for hours. I let my jaw hang slightly slack. I made sure my eyes took 3 seconds too long to track his movement. "Mr. Miller," Aris said, leaning in close. I could smell the expensive gin on his breath. "Your family is very concerned. They say you've been violent, smashing cars, forgetting names. Do you know where you are?" "I'm in the dirt," I whispered, letting a single tear roll down my cheek, pure acting, fueled by the memory of my brother's betrayal. "We're digging a foundation for a house that isn't there." I saw Jeff nod frantically. Vanessa wiped away a fake tear of her own. Aris spent 20 minutes asking me questions I purposely failed. He pulled out a stack of papers, the commitment forms. He told them that in my current state, I was a danger to myself and the community. He said the private ward in Colorado Springs was ready for me by morning. But then the close call hit. After Aris left to finalize the filing in his car, Vanessa went to the kitchen to pour a celebratory round of drinks. I was still in the chair, eyes closed, listening through the hidden mic in the kitchen. "Wait," Vanessa's voice came through my earpiece, sharp and jagged. "Jeff, come here now." My heart hammered against my ribs. I watched the feed on the small, transparent screen hidden in the palm of my hand. Vanessa was standing by the electrical outlet near the toaster. She was holding a small, silver pry tool from her purse. She noticed the slight misalignment of the outlet cover where Elias had tucked the primary microphone. "What is it?" Jeff asked, his voice shaking. "The screw is turned the wrong way," she hissed. "Sam doesn't touch the outlets. He's too busy being a vegetable, and that retired business rival of his, Hatcher, I saw a black van on the corner this morning." She reached out and jammed the pry tool into the gap. I had 3 seconds before she ripped out the heart of my evidence. I didn't think I reacted. I let out a blood-curdling scream and threw myself out of the recliner, crashing onto the hardwood floor. I started thrashing, kicking the coffee table, sending a glass vase shattering against the wall. "The birds," I roared, my voice raw and terrifying. "They're in the walls, get them out. Jeff, they're eating the wires." The kitchen door flew open. Vanessa and Jeff scrambled into the room, their faces pale with shock. Vanessa dropped the pry tool, the outlet cover forgotten. They lunged for me, trying to pin my arms down. I made sure to catch Jeff in the jaw with a stray elbow, hard enough to make his teeth rattle. "Get the sedative," Jeff shouted, clutching his face. "He's having a full psychotic break." Vanessa ran for the vitamins. They pinned me down and forced 2 pills into my mouth. I let them. I knew I'd have to vomit them up the second they left, but the distraction had worked. Vanessa was so rattled by my outburst that she didn't go back to the outlet. They hauled me back into the chair and sat there, watching me until my breathing slowed. They were shaken. They thought the drug-induced madness was finally boiling over. "We need to move him tonight," Vanessa whispered, her hair a mess, her composure gone. "I don't care about the morning, call the transport. Now." I sat there, the bitter taste of the pills under my tongue, watching them through half-closed lids. The close call had nearly burned me, but it had also accelerated their timeline. They were moving tonight. Which meant I had exactly 4 hours to make sure the sheriff was in position, before the ambulance arrived to take me to a place I'd never return from. I closed my eyes and let the fog settle back over my face. The hunt was moving into the final phase, and the blind mule was about to show them exactly how hard he could kick. The night air in Denver was thin and freezing, the kind of cold that makes the timber in an old house groan like it's in pain. I sat in my darkened living room, my head back, eyes tracing the shadows on the ceiling. I'd vomited up the pills the second they left the room, but the metallic taste of their betrayal was still heavy on my tongue. Through the hidden microphones, I listened to them in the kitchen. They weren't whispering anymore. They thought the old mule was sedated into a coma. "The transport will be here in 20 minutes, I heard Jeff say. The sound of a whiskey bottle hitting the counter followed. "Toby, did you get the GPS trackers off the excavators? If the buyer moves them across the state line tonight, they need to be dark." "Done, Dad," Toby replied, his voice thick with an arrogance that made my skin crawl. "I told the fence in Utah that the titles are clean. He's wiring the first $100,000 to our private account the second the truck clears the yard. By the time Uncle Sam wakes up in that facility, he won't even own the dirt under his fingernails." Then Vanessa spoke, her voice dropping to that lethal, clinical tone she used when she thought no one was looking. She told them they were thinking too small. She said the insurance policy on my life was worth more than the machinery. She told Jeff that accidents happen in private wards all the time, a bad reaction to medication, a fall in the shower. She said she'd already cleared it with the director of the facility. I felt a surge of cold, hard clarity. They weren't just stealing my business. They were planning a murder for hire, disguised as medical neglect. That was when the dark second layer hit me. Vanessa mentioned a name, Morrison. She asked Jeff if he remembered how easy the Morrison job was in Phoenix. My heart did a slow, heavy thud. Vanessa's first husband had died in a freak pool accident 4 years ago. I'd always thought it was a tragedy. Now I realized it was a rehearsal. I wasn't her second chance. I was her 4th harvest. The sound of tires on gravel snapped me back to the room. A white, unmarked van pulled into my driveway. No sirens, no lights, just 2 men in white scrubs who looked more like nightclub bouncers than medical professionals. Aris, the shady doctor, met them at the door. I heard the clink of handcuffs and the rustle of heavy straps. This was the moment. The vultures were in the room and they were reaching for the cage. They walked into the living room. Jeff was in the lead, holding the commitment papers. He looked at me with a fake, watery sadness. He told me it was time for my long nap. He told me he'd take care of the yard while I was gone. The two bouncers moved toward me, their hands reaching for my arms. "Wait," I said. My voice wasn't thin anymore. It wasn't a whisper. It was the same booming roar I used when a crane operator was about to drop a 5-ton load on a crew. The room went dead silent. The bouncers froze. Jeff took a step back, his eyes bulging as if he'd just seen a corpse sit up on a morgue slab. You're drugged," Jeff stammered, looking at Vanessa. "The pills. Aris said you were gone." I stood up from the recliner, my back straight, the fog vanishing from my eyes like smoke in a gale. I looked at the doctor and told him that his medical license was about to be the shortest-lived document in the state of Colorado. I looked at Vanessa and told her that Mr. Morrison sent his regards from the grave. "The birds aren't in the walls, Jeff," I said, stepping toward him. "But the cameras are, and the sheriff has been listening to your Utah deal for the last 3 hours." Vanessa lunged for her purse, her eyes wild with a predatory desperation. She told Toby to get the gun from the hallway. But before the kid could move, I whistled, a sharp, piercing sound that cut through the mountain air. Sound of the front door being kicked off its hinges, and the shouting of armed men. I didn't call the local deputies. I called Hatcher, my oldest business rival. We fought over every major contract in Denver for 20 years, but Hatcher was a man of honor. When I showed him the footage of my own brother stealing my excavators, he didn't just give me advice. He gave me his personal security detail, 4 ex-special forces guys who didn't care about private wards. They burst through the door, weapons drawn, and had the bouncers on the floor in 3 seconds. Toby tried to run for the back porch, but one of Hatcher's men tackled him into the coffee table, shattering it into 1,000,000 pieces. Jeff stood there, the commitment papers fluttering to the floor like white surrender flags. He looked at me and started sobbing, telling me he was sorry, that he was in debt, that Vanessa made him do it. I didn't feel a shred of pity. I looked at the man I'd shared a childhood with and realized that blood doesn't make you family, loyalty does. And Jeff had bled me dry. "The hunt is over, Jeff," I said, my voice as cold as the mountain ice. "Now we're going to talk about the Utah fence, and we're going to talk about what really happened in Phoenix." The first layer of the trap had snapped shut, but as the sirens finally began to wail in the distance, I looked at Vanessa. She wasn't crying. She was smiling. A slow, jagged smile that told me she still had one more card to play. The dark second layer was deeper than I thought, and the real fight was just beginning. The sirens were screaming now, their blue and red lights bouncing off the mountain mist like ghosts. Hatcher's men had Jeff and the bouncers pinned to the floor, but Vanessa was still standing. She wasn't trembling. She wasn't looking for a way out. She was looking at me with that jagged, terrifying smile, and she let out a laugh that sounded like dry leaves skittering over a grave. She told me I was a hell of a detective, but a pathetic businessman. She reached into her silk robe and pulled out a single laminated sheet of paper. She told me to look at the date. It was from 3 months ago, the day I'd signed what I thought were health insurance renewals in my office. It wasn't insurance. It was a transfer-on-death deed for the entire Aurora yard and a living trust agreement that handed her 60% of Miller Excavation II, a doctor. Any doctor declared me mentally unfit. "Aris signed the declaration 10 minutes ago, Sam," Vanessa hissed, her eyes glinting with a cold, predatory light. "Under Colorado law, the second that ink dried, you became a guest in this house. The cameras, the recordings, they don't matter. You're a non-person, you can't testify, you can't sue. And as for the yard, I already sold the remaining fleet to the Utah buyer an hour ago. The trucks are moving as we speak." My heart felt like it had been hit with a wrecking ball. She'd been 3 steps ahead of me the whole time. She hadn't just been poisoning my body, she'd been poisoning my legal standing. That's when Hatcher's radio crackled. One of his guys at the equipment yard in Aurora was shouting. He told Hatcher that someone was in the main office, someone who had the bypass codes to the main server. They were wiping the dead zone footage, deleting the evidence of the excavator theft in real time. "Who is it?" Hatcher barked into his mic. "It's Sarah, sir," the voice replied. "The company accountant, she's at the terminal. She's got a shredder going, too." I felt the floor drop out from under me. Sarah. She'd been with me for 15 years. She'd seen my kids grow up. She'd helped me bury my first wife. She was the one who knew every cent that moved through the company. She wasn't just my employee. She was the one person I thought was untouchable by the rot. The betrayal of my brother was a cut. The betrayal of my wife was a wound. But Sarah, that was the killing blow. "We need to get to the yard," I said, my voice barely a growl. I didn't wait for the sheriff. I didn't wait for the paperwork. I grabbed the tire iron from the kitchen counter, the one I'd used to smash the G-Wagon, and I headed for Hatcher's SUV. Vanessa tried to block the door, shouting that I was a trespasser, but I walked right through her. I didn't touch her. I just let the weight of my rage push her aside. We tore through the Denver streets, hitting 80 on the industrial backroads of Aurora. By the time we skidded into the yard, the gates were wide open. I saw the silhouettes of my heavy haulers moving toward the highway, millions of dollars in iron, being stolen by my own blood. I jumped out of the SUV before it even stopped. I ran for the office trailer, my boots pounding on the gravel. I kicked the door open so hard it dented the siding. Sarah was there. She was standing over the server rack, a USB drive in her hand and a look of cold, professional detachment on her face. She didn't scream. She didn't look guilty. She just looked at me and told me that I'd been bad for business lately. She said Vanessa had offered her a $2 million consulting fee to clean the books, and that loyalty didn't pay the mortgage in a city as expensive as Denver. "It's done, Sam," Sarah said, pointing to the glowing format-complete message on the screen. "The yard is empty. The records are gone. You're just a man in a neck brace with no proof." I looked at the shredder, filled with the paper trail of my life's work. I looked at the woman I'd trusted with every secret, and then I looked at the tire iron in my hand. I didn't hit her. I walked past her to the main terminal. I told her she'd forgotten one thing about being a dinosaur like me. I told her that men who grow up in the dirt don't trust the cloud. I reached under the desk, into the metal floor plating I'd welded myself 10 years ago. I pulled out a hidden, analog hardwired backup drive, a system that wasn't connected to the network. It was my black box. It had captured every keystroke she'd made in the last hour. It had the original titles. It had the Phoenix files I'd recovered from Vanessa's safe. The look of pure, system-wide collapse on Sarah's face was the first bit of peace I'd felt in years. "The sheriff is at the gate, Sarah," I said, my voice heavy with a final, crushing authority. "And I think he's going to be real interested in why the company accountant is helping a serial widow move stolen iron across state lines." Just then, a heavy thud echoed from the yard. One of the haulers had been blocked by Hatcher's men. The physical shock wasn't over. I walked out to the yard and saw Toby jumping out of the lead truck, trying to run into the dark fields. I didn't chase him. I didn't have to. The sheriff's helicopter swept its searchlight over the yard, pinning him like a bug in the dirt. The vultures were cornered. The feast was over. But as I stood there in the cold Aurora night, clutching my backup drive, I realized the dark second layer was finally fully exposed. Vanessa hadn't just targeted me for money. She'd been working with a syndicate, a group that Sarah and Jeff were already deep in debt to. I wasn't just fighting for my company. I was fighting a machine that had been eating men like me for decades, and I was about to rip the heart out of it. The trial at the Denver County Courthouse was a cold, clinical autopsy of a life I thought I knew. I sat in the front row every single day, my back straight despite the titanium rod and my legs screaming in the air-conditioned chill. I wanted them to see me. I wanted them to look into the eyes of the dinosaur who had watched them dig their own graves. The evidence on my black box drive was the final shovel of dirt. It didn't just have the logs of Sarah wiping the servers. It had the digital ghosts of Vanessa's past. Hatcher's team and the FBI spent 3 months untangling the web, and what they found was a slaughterhouse. Vanessa hadn't just targeted me. She was a professional harvester for a multi-state estate fraud syndicate. They looked for self-made men with high-value assets and no heirs, used women like Vanessa to infiltrate their lives, and used experts like Dr. Aris to erase their legal existence. The Phoenix connection was the most damning. The drive contained a recorded call between Vanessa and the syndicate's lead cleaner in Arizona. They talked about my predecessor, Mr. Morrison, like he was a piece of equipment that had outlived its usefulness. Hearing her laugh about the pool incident, while she sat at the defense table in her orange jumpsuit, was the moment the jury's faces turned to stone. The sentencing was a massacre for the defense. Vanessa got life without the possibility of parole for the Phoenix murders and the attempted murder of a Denver citizen. Dr. Aris was stripped of his license and handed 20 years for racketeering. My accountant, Sarah, took a plea deal, 10 years in exchange for testifying about the syndicate's offshore accounts. But it was Jeff and Toby who hurt the most. Watching my own brother plead for mercy, blaming his gambling debts and the pressure of being in my shadow, made me feel a sickness no digitalis could ever cause. Toby, the kid I'd bailated out of jail and tried to teach a trade, just stared at the floor, a hollow shell of the man he could have been. Jeff got 15 years for grand theft and conspiracy. Toby got 8. As they led them away in shackles, the metallic clink sounded like the final bolt being tightened on a coffin. My family was officially dead. I returned to Miller Excavation a week later. The Aurora yard was quiet, the heavy machinery sitting like sleeping giants under the Colorado sun. I spent the first month cleaning. I fired every supervisor who had looked the other way while Jeff moved my trucks. I tore up the transfer on death deeds and rebuilt the company's legal foundation with a team of lawyers Hatcher recommended, men who actually had souls. I'm 49 years old. I live alone in the house where they tried to kill me, but I don't feel like a victim. I replaced the G-Wagon I smashed with a rugged, customized Chevy truck, the kind of machine that belongs in the dirt, not a showroom. I kept the tire iron in the passenger seat as a trophy. It's a reminder that sometimes you have to break something valuable to see the rot that's hiding inside. People in Denver call me a legend for the way I played the fool to catch a syndicate. They say I'm a hero, but I don't feel like a hero. I'm just a man who knows that in construction and in life, the most important thing you can build is a defense. You can pour the strongest concrete in the world, but if you let a snake into the foundation, the whole building is coming down. I sat on my porch last night, watching the lights of Denver flicker in the distance. The metallic taste is gone. The dizzy spells have faded. I'm alive, and my empire is secure. I've started a trust fund for the children of the men Vanessa destroyed before me, a way to make sure some good came out of all that darkness. The hunt is over. The vultures have starved. And for the first time in 30 years, I'm not digging for a payday. I'm just enjoying the view from the top of the hole I climbed out of. I'm Sam Miller. I'm an excavator, and I'm still the smartest man in the yard.